Hi, I'm Ted, and welcome to Ching Cards of Destiny. So, before we get into the game, I think it's worthwhile probably giving some background about the I Ching, which is what this game is based on. The I Ching is an ancient book, a Taoist text from China dating back over 4,000 years. And in the Taoist tradition, a cultivated person or a virtuous person understands the dynamics of nature in an effort to live in balance and in harmony with nature. And the most primal forces of nature are, in Chinese, yin and yang, which are characterized by the symbol here. The two fish swimming with each other there in the center of this symbol. The white fish is the yang fish that's rising up, and the yin fish is the black fish that's swimming down. In the I Ching, yin and yang is represented by lines, the symbol of lines. And here you have what's called a yang line, which is a solid line. And here you have a broken line, which is a yin line. And, you know, in nature, everything is really a combination of yin and yang. And one of the properties of yin and yang is that yin and yang can transform from one into the other in this constant natural cycle. So all of nature, as we look out, is in a dynamic state of change. Day into night, night into day, the seasons changing from one season into the other, weather patterns that change, even within interpersonal and political relationships. There's power dynamics that change and wax and wane over cycles of time. And the I Ching, to some degree, was a way to study that, and thereby also, again, being a cultivated or virtuous person, one would learn to recognize these different dynamics at play in the present moment, and thereby, behave accordingly to be in harmony with nature. So, within the I Ching, so let's take one step back here. So we have these yin and yang lines, and you can start combining them to make different combinations. If you use 3 lines together, you can start to make symbols that might look something like this. That is called a trigram. Here we have a symbol that's composed of 3 lines, 2 yang lines and a yin line on the bottom. Or, if you flip it over, a yin line on the top and 2 yang lines on the bottom. Okay, so, and when you make trigrams using a combination of yin and yang lines, when you draw 3-line symbols called trigrams, there are 8 possible symbols that you can create using 3 lines of yin and yang. And those 8 trigrams are the trigrams that you see here on this symbol surrounding the yin-yang fish, the Taiji symbol. Those are what's called in Chinese the bagua. And I'll go over those symbols very quickly with you here. The first one is 3 yang lines. This represents heaven. The opposite of that is 3 yin lines. That represents earth. Then we get into more complex interactions. You can have 2 two yang lines with a yin line in the middle, that's fire. You'll notice fire is symmetrical. Here we have the opposite of that. See how it's the opposite. This, two yin lines with a yang line in the middle, that's water. So here, fire and water are the opposite of each other. Then we get into symbols like this. Two yang lines on the bottom, and a yin line on the top. This is lake. If you turn it over and have two yang lines on top and a yin line on the bottom, this represents wood or wind. Here we have two yin lines on the top and a yang line on the bottom. This represents thunder. If you turn it upside down so you have a yang line on the top and two yin lines on the bottom, this becomes mountain. And this is what's called the Bagua. And that would be heaven, earth, fire, water, lake, wind or wood, thunder, and mountain. And we'll be using these trigrams in this game to create what are called hexagrams. And that's what's in the I Ching. The I Ching is when you combine these trigrams together to make a 6-line symbol, you get what's called a hexagram. And again, when you're talking about making 6-line symbols using either a solid line or a broken line, you can have 64 combinations. There's 64 possible combinations. And those are the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. Each one has its name and number that they appear in order in the I Ching. And the I Ching is also further subdivided into 2 books. One is called the Upper Canon, one is called the Lower Canon. The Upper Canon are the first 30 hexagrams of the I Ching. They are considered to be the more auspicious or heavenly hexagram symbols. And then the Lower Canon is comprised of the remaining 34 hexagrams. And together that creates the entire 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. So again, going back to the I Ching as well as the game, a virtuous person would study these 64 hexagrams, these dynamics of nature, and be able to recognize when those dynamics are playing out in the world around them, and thereby adjusting their behavior to be in harmony with the dynamics of nature. And also, as mentioned before, these dynamics are constantly changing. So one hexagram, can be changing into another hexagram just by changing one of the yang lines into a yin line, or a yin line into a yang line creates a completely different symbol and a different dynamic of nature. And that's how natural cycles occur. And this gets played out in this game. So let's get into the game and take a look at the cards and how things work. Okay, so here I am with my I Ching Cards of Destiny. One side of the box has the symbol for the I Ching on it. The other side of the box of cards tells you what deck we have. We have 3 decks. The first deck has this symbol on it, and this is the trigram deck. More about this in a minute. This deck has the symbol for upper cannon on it. This contains the upper cannon deck. And then this last box has this symbol on it for the lower cannon, and this contains the cards of the lower cannon. Let's take a look at each one of these decks individually really quickly so we understand what we're working with. First, let's take a look at the trigram deck. This is the deck that we're going to mostly be using when we play the game. This is these are the cards that we're playing with as our hand, okay? And the trigram deck, as it suggests, has images of each of the 8 trigrams on it that we talked about a little bit earlier. We go to different trigrams. There's one. Also in the trigram deck are 2 cards that are wild cards, and they look like this. These cards can be played for any trigram you want it to be. Okay, just one trigram though. Also contained within the deck are several cards that look like this. These are called changing line cards. And here we have 2 of them. The first card is a changing line yin to yang. This means that you can change one of the lines on a trigram from a yin line to a yang line. And then here we have a changing line card of, yang to yin. This allows you to change one yang line on a trigram into a yin line. And what does that mean? Let's take here for example. This trigram right here is the heaven trigram. If I combine it with this changing line card, that means that I can change any of these yang lines into a yin line, one yin line. So, for example, if I change the middle line on this card, then the trigram then would go from heaven to being fire. If I change the top line, it would go from heaven to lake. If I change the bottom line, it would go from heaven into wind or wood. Similarly, using the yin to yang changing line card, I can combine it with any trigram card and change one of the yin lines to a yang line. So here, if I change one of the yang lines to a yin line, or one of the yin lines to a yang line, I can create mountain, or I could create thunder. Or if I change the middle line to a yin line, then I can make water. That's how changing line cards work. We'll get to that when we actually get, we'll talk about that a little bit more when we actually get into the play of the game. But that is the trigram deck right there in a nutshell. Put that back in the box. Next, let's talk about the lower cannon deck. Okay, onto the lower cannon deck with this symbol here. On this deck are 34 cards, each one representing one of the 34 hexagrams of the lower cannon. You'll notice as you go through this deck that there are 4 cards that have golden borders around them. Look like this. There are 4 hexagrams within the lower cannon that are comprised of double trigrams. So you see the trigram is repeated. In this case, it's the trigram for wood, double wood, and that is proceeding humbly. In this case, with the with these cards. Here's the 4 of them. One is Joyful, which is double Lake. One is Taking Action, which is double Thunder. This one is Keeping Still, which is Mountain over Mountain. And this one is Proceeding Humbly, which is Wood over Wood. These are worth extra points as denoted at the bottom of the card. Otherwise, when it comes to scoring, each of these cards in this deck are worth 1 point. That's the lower cannon deck. Now we get to the upper cannon deck. The upper cannon deck has the 30 trigrams of the upper cannon of the I Ching, 1 to 30. These cards are a little bit more complicated than the cards in the lower cannon. They look like this. They have the upper cannon symbol on them with a gold border on the back of the card. The front of the card, you'll notice, has colored borders on it as well, of different colors. We have green, 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 gold, because in the upper cannon there are 4 cards that have a double trigram. This one's Darkness, which is water over water. Brightness, which is fire over fire. But then we have some that have blue borders on them. And we have a few that have red borders on them. And we'll get into each of these individual cards a little bit later on in this video. But the different colors represent different things. So like in the lower cannon, the ones with the golden borders, those are worth extra points. The ones with the green borders are action cards. These have an action that gets played out when this card gets played. The blue cards are attribute cards. When you get one of these cards, it gives you a special power. And then the last one are the red borders. These have something to do with points as well. There's 3 of them. One of them doubles your score at the end. One of them halves your score at the end. And the other one is worth -5 points. So that's the cards of the upper cannon. Let's now get into setting up and playing the game. Okay, so here we are, ready to get set up to play our game. We have our 3 decks of cards. We're just going to take out the upper cannon deck, give it a quick shuffle. That goes right there. Take out the lower cannon deck. Give it a quick shuffle right there. Leave a little space. Then I'm going to take the my trigram deck. Oops. Give it a quick shuffle. Set it right there. Now, you can play this game with anywhere between 2 and probably 4 players, maybe more. Who knows? We've only tried it up to 4. Everybody gets 4 cards, so you deal everybody 4 trigram cards. And this makes up your hand. And we play with our trigram cards face up, so everyone can see each other's cards. There's a couple reasons for this that'll become more apparent a little bit later on. But part of it is you are obligated to make a match if you can. And this way, with people looking at each other's cards, you can help each other, make sure that people are not missing matches that they could make. So everyone has 4 cards here face up. Little caveat to this is 2 of your 4 cards need to be actual trigram cards or a wild card. if you end up with, like, let's just say, for example, hypothetically, when I was dealt my hand, I had 3 or more changing line cards in my hand. I can't make a match because you have to have at least 2 trigrams to play. So if that ever happens, what you do is you just discard one of your changing line cards and draw another card until you get at least 2 trigram cards in your hand, and then you can begin playing. So here we go. We have our hand, we have our upper cannon deck, we have our lower cannon deck, we have our trigram deck, and then we have a discard pile that is created over here. Gameplay begins. Everybody, this is how you pick who goes first. Everyone just picks a card off of the lower cannon deck. Person who draws the highest number card goes first. And take the cards, put them back in the deck. Here we go. So, I won, I'm going first. Play starts by, I take a lower cannon card, turn it over face up. That's going to show a hexagram. My job now is I want to try to use my trigram cards out of my hand to make a match of that hexagram. And in this case, I have these 2 trigram cards, and I have 2 changing line cards that change me from yang into yin lines. And I have this hexagram card. This trigram matches the lower trigram on the hexagram card. However, this trigram does not match the trigram on the top. Using my changing line cards, unfortunately, I cannot make this trigram match the trigram on the top, which means that I can't make a match. Bad example. Let's go fishing through the cards a little bit here. I need a fire. So let's find ourselves, here we go. Let's just pretend that, let's pretend this was my hand. Now, this is the card I drew, and in my hand I've got a trigram for fire, and I've got the trigram for wood or wind. That's a match. You see that? That makes a match. So what I would do is I would take these 2 cards, say I make a match, put those 2 cards in the discard pile, I take this hexagram card and I keep it. And this goes over here in what we're calling our virtue pile. This is where we're collecting virtues by being in harmony with nature. So here we go. That's worth 1 point. That's the end of my turn. Then it goes to the next person. Let's come back around. Let's say it's my turn again. I used 2 cards to make a match. Last turn, I need to draw 2 new cards into my hand. So I have 4 cards in my hand. I turn another hexagram card over and start my turn. In this case, I've drawn this hexagram card. Got heaven underneath, lake on the top. It just so happens that I have those 2 trigram cards in my hand to make the match. So I make the match, and I get another virtue card. Let's do something a little bit more complicated. So here we go. I have this hexagram card. You can see on the top is wood, on the bottom is mountain. You may also notice that if you take that card and turn it upside down, that could also be thunder over lake. In my hand, I have these 2 trigram cards. I can make a match like this. Nope. Like this. See that? That's a match. However, if I take the cards and do this, that becomes an opposite match. Do you see how the yang lines here are yin lines here and vice versa on the bottom? That's what we're calling an opposite match. There are several cards in the deck that when you make a match, they also at the same time make an opposite match. In that situation, you have the choice as the player to say you're either making the match or you're making the opposite match. If you make an opposite match, then you get to take that card and put it in your virtue pile, and you also get to draw one card from the upper cannon deck and add that to your virtue pile as well. Now, as we talked about earlier, the cards in the upper cannon deck have all of these different powers to them. Depending on what card you draw, several things could happen. If I draw a card with a green border, that's an action card. And at that time, you read what the action is that's stated on that card, and you carry it out. That only happens once. When the card is pulled off of the upper cannon deck, you perform that action. After you've performed that action, that card then ends up in your virtue pile and it's worth 1 point. If you pull a card that has a blue border, that is an attribute card. That gives you some kind of special power that stays with you as long as you have this card in your virtue pile. It's not an action, it's a power that you have that you get to play with. We'll go over these later. But you get a blue card, it goes in your virtue pile. Green cards and blue cards are both worth 1 point each, just like any other average card from the lower cannon. As I showed you earlier, there's some cards that have gold borders. They're worth more points than others. And then there's also some cards that have red borders. Again, these cards just go, when you pull it off the pile, that card goes into your virtue pile, and whatever it says on it is what's going to happen. So if you get the one that says it's worth -5 points, when you add up your final score, you subtract 5 points from your final score. If you get the one that multiplies your final score by double, well then if you have that card in your virtue pile at the end of the game, then after you've added up your cards, you get to double your final score. That's what that card, that's the value of that card. So so going back again real quickly to what we were talking about before, you get to draw an upper cannon card if you make an opposite match on the hexagram card. A real obvious example of making an opposite match would be, let's do this one. And I'm going to get the right trigram cards so I can show you. There we go. Okay, so let's say I drew this card, Keeping Still. It's mountain over mountain. A match play on that would be as if I played 2 mountain trigram cards. That's a match. To make an opposite match would be if I played 2 lake trigram cards. See how that's the lake is the opposite of the mountain. That's an opposite match. Let's get a little bit more complicated here. Do something else. Let's say let's do this. I've got this card and I've got this card. Not a match. But I also have this changing line card, yang line to a yin line. I can combine this card with this card to change one of those yang lines into a yin line, so that in effect it becomes this trigram. Now I can play this combination of cards with this trigram card to make a match for this. I could do a similar thing with my changing line cards. Let's pretend for a minute that I had two changing line cards of yin to yang lines, and I had these two trigram cards in my hand. Now that's a match to this card. However, if I take these two changing line cards and I change two of those yin lines to yang lines, these trigrams now become the opposite match for this, because those trigrams can become as though they're this trigram, making an opposite match. We're gonna do a dry run of the game so you get a chance, and I'll have the camera set up on an overhead so that you'll be able to see it that more in action. So that's making matches and opposite matches. So if you make an opposite match, you not only get to keep the card that you made the match, that goes into your virtue pile, you also get to draw a card from the upper canon deck, and you do whatever it says on that card. In this case, this one is go again. So you go again. All right. Wild cards are very simple. They look like this. There's two of them. These little fishies swimming on them. Those can be any one trigram that you want it to be, and to make a match, or to make an opposite match, as the case may be, depending on what you want. Now, with the changing line cards and the trigram cards, you have the possibility that when you're making a match, let's say you have two trigram cards and two changing line cards in your hand, and you flip something over, and you can combine all four cards together to make the trigrams match the way you want them. So you use all four cards in your hand, emptying out your hand completely. If you do that, you get to go again. You get to draw four new cards to your hand and go again, because you used all four cards in your hand. Little bonus there. All right. Next special situation that may arise that we need to talk about, and that is, what if I can't make a match? So let's say I go, I've got my four cards in my hand face up, I flip over a card here from the lower canon deck, I look at my cards, I can't make a match. Okay, I say I can't make a match. Now one of two things can happen. Either one, my turn can just be over now, that's it, done. Or I might look at the cards that I have in my hand and decide that I want to get rid of one. At which point I'm going to take the one that I don't want, I discard it, and draw one fresh card from the trigram deck. And that concludes my turn, and it goes to the next person. Now, when it gets to the next person, they're gonna start their turn by drawing enough cards from the trigram deck to make four cards, and then they're gonna flip over another card from the lower canon deck, thus making a little stack of cards here. Their job is to try to make a match with the top card now showing. If they can do that, they get to keep both of those cards. They win the stack. They take those cards and put them in their virtue pile. For winning that stack, they get the reward of being able to then also draw a card from the upper cannon deck and doing whatever that card says. One more thing, and then that's the end of their turn. So they not only get the stack, but they get an upper cannon card. Let's go back real quick. Let's say the second person also can't make a match. Well, then the play continues around the board, each new person flipping another card over and trying to make a match on that card. Play keeps going that way until someone is able to make a match with the top card showing, and in which case they win the entire stack of cards here. That goes into their virtue pile, and by winning a stack, they get to draw a card from the upper cannon deck to also add to the virtue pile. Last thing that can happen is you not only make a match to win the stack, but you make an opposite match to win the stack. In which case, you get to draw a card for winning the stack, do whatever that says on the card, and then once you're done with that, you get to draw another one because you made an opposite match. So you get 2 cards from the upper cannon deck for winning a stack with an opposite match. And that's how the game goes. The game ends when you have gone through the entire deck of lower cannon cards and there are no more. You may or may not make it all the way through the upper cannon deck. Doesn't always happen. But once you've made it through all the way through the upper cannon cards and they've all been matched and in people's virtue piles, then what you do, play ends, and then everyone just adds up how many points they have in the virtue pile, simply by counting how many cards they have and adding up all the points. So, as talked about earlier, standard cards in the lower cannon deck are worth 1 point each. Green and blue bordered cards from the upper cannon deck are also worth 1 point each. Any card from either deck that has a gold border around it is going to tell you how many points it's worth, so you add it to that. And then if you have any cards that have red borders on them, you're going to do whatever the red border says. So that's either going to be you minus 5 points from your total, or you double your score, or you halve your score. And there's another one that actually allows you to double the value of your highest point card that you have in your virtue pile. So in this case, I have this one here, Proceeding Humbly, that's worth 7 points. If I have Proceeding Humbly and the card from the upper cannon that allows me to double the value of one of my cards, then this gets to be worth 14 points toward my final score. Person with the highest number of points at the end of the game wins. And that's it. Now, one last thing that could come up during the game is that you go through the entire trigram deck and it all ends up in the discard pile. Okay, well, when that happens, you just take the discard pile, you shuffle, you give it a good shuffle, and keep going. Cards 101. Okay, so I'm going to clean up these cards real quick, and I'm going to set up the camera a little bit differently. And what we're going to do is we're going to play through a couple of hands of Cards of Destiny to show you how it goes. But actually, before I do that, we're actually going to go through all of the special cards in the upper cannon. So give me a minute. I'm going to arrange the upper cannon cards so we can just go through them in order real simply, and that'll be the next chapter in our video. Okay, here we are with our upper cannon cards. We'll just go through them one at a time, 1 through 30. Number 1, Initiating, Heaven Over Heaven. It's worth 9 points. It's the most valuable card in the deck. If you have this in your virtue pile at the end of the game, it's worth 9 points. Number 2, Responding, Earth Over Earth. It's worth 8 points. Second highest value card in the deck. 3, Beginning. This is a green border card, so it has an action. When you draw this card from the deck, it says return all your lower cannon cards back to the deck. So that means any lower cannon cards that you have in your virtue pile gets returned back to the lower cannon deck, and that's it. So if you get to keep this card because it's an upper cannon card, but any other lower cannon cards that you might have in your virtue pile at that time get returned to the deck. All right, number 4, Childhood. This card, when you draw this card, each player gives the youngest player 1 hexagram card from their virtue pile. Hexagram cards are, of course, either upper cannon cards or lower cannon cards. You pick which one you want to give them. 5, Needing. If you draw this card, this is a blue card. This has an attribute to it. If you have this card in your virtue pile, this gives you the ability to take cards from other people's hands while you're playing to make matches. So this is another reason. This is a reason why we play with our hands open and face up, so that if someone has this card, they can see what everybody has in their hand, and they can pull cards from people's hands to make matches when they're playing. Very powerful card. It makes it basically easy to make a match anytime you want to. Number 6, Contention. This is another blue card. This card protects you from having cards taken from your hand by someone who might have number 5, Needing. So if you have this card in your virtue pile, you're protected from losing cards from your hand. 7, Multitude. If you have this card in your virtue pile at the end of the game, you get to multiply the value of your highest value hexagram card in your virtue pile by 2. So going back to a previous example, let's say you would have had Initiating in your virtue pile at the end of the game. If you have this card, you get to multiply that by 2, so it in effect becomes worth 18 points instead of 9. Worthwhile card. Union. If you draw this card, this tells you to trade your virtue piles with another player. It's that simple. You just pick another player, you trade virtue piles. This could work to your advantage in being able to trade with someone who has a much bigger, more valuable virtue pile than you, or you might end up losing a very large virtue pile and having to trade with someone who has a smaller pile. You get to pick who you trade with. Number 9, Little Accumulation. If you have this card in your virtue pile at the end of the game, you reduce your final score by half, divided by 2. Number 10, Fulfillment. If you have this card in your virtue pile at the end of the game, you get to double your final score. Very good card to have. Number 11, Advance. This card allows you to go again. Just take another turn. Number 12, Hindrance. If you draw this card, as long as you have this card in your virtue pile, you can only make opposite matches. You're not allowed to make regular matches when you're playing. You're limited to only being able to make opposite matches. That's the hindrance. 13, Seeking Harmony. This is another card that obliges you to trade virtue piles with another player. 14, Great Harvest. This is a green card. When you draw this card, it allows you to pick. You pick one hexagram card from every player's virtue pile that you want to take, that you're going to harvest from them. That's the Great Harvest. You get to take one hexagram card from every other player. If they don't have a virtue pile yet, like let's say you get this right in the beginning of the game and no one has any virtue piles, well, you don't get any cards. That's the way it goes. 15, humbleness. This card, you give away half of your virtue pile, and then you draw 5 new lower cannon cards from the lower cannon deck. So, what you're going to do in this case is you're just going to count up how many cards you have in your virtue pile. You're going to divide it by 2. You're going to round up if it's an odd number. And you're going to give away half of your cards. You get to pick which cards you're going to give away. You also get to pick who you're going to give them to. You don't have to give them to just one single player. You could divide the cards up among all the different players that are playing at the table, but you're going to give away half of your virtue pile. And then you're going to draw 5 new lower cannon cards to put in your virtue pile. Now, let's say your virtue pile at the time that you draw this is only got 3 cards in it. So you got 3 cards, divide that by 2, that's 1.5, so you round up 2. You're going to give away 2 cards. But then you're going to draw 5 cards. So in essence, you get ahead by 3 cards. Let's say, though, you draw this near the end of the game and you've got a virtue pile that's got 20 cards in it. In that case, you're going to give away 10 of your cards. You get to pick which 10, who you're going to give them to, and then you draw 5 new lower cannon cards from the lower cannon deck. In this case, you're giving away 10 and you're only getting back 5. So this card can work in your favor, it could work against you. 16, delight. This card, if you draw this card, each player at the table has to give you their highest value hexagram card out of their virtue pile. 17, following. If you draw this card from the upper cannon deck, the oldest player at the table gives you one of their hexagram cards out of their virtue pile. 18, remedying. This card, if you have this card in your virtue pile, it's a blue card, it protects you from the Great Harvest card. So if you have this in your card, or in your virtue pile, at the time another player might draw number 14, the Great Harvest, they cannot take any of your virtue pile cards from you because you're protected with it with this card, Delight. Next card, 19, approaching. This card if you draw this card allows you to take the Great Accumulation card out of another player's virtue pile if someone has it. If it hasn't been played yet or drawn out of the upper cannon deck, then this card is meaningless. It's just worth 1 point. But if someone has the Great Accumulation card in their virtue pile, you get to take it and put it into your virtue pile. We'll get to the Great Accumulation card in a minute. Next one though, 20, watching. You lose a turn. 21, eradicating. This is a very powerful card, and depending on if it gets played in the game, when it gets played in the game, in the beginning or the end, can have very dramatic changes on the outcome of the game. If this card is drawn, all players must return all of their virtue piles back to the decks. So what you have to do in that case is you have to sort out your upper cannon cards from your lower cannon cards, return the lower cannon cards back to the lower cannon deck, and the upper cannon cards back to the upper cannon deck. There are 2 cards that protect you from eradicating if you have them in your virtue pile at the time that this card is drawn. One of them is number 22, adorning. This card is a blue card. It specifically protects you from eradicating. So if you have this card in your virtue pile when the eradicating card is pulled, you do not have to return any of your virtue pile back to the decks. Number 23, falling away. This card is worth -5 points. So you subtract, if you pull this card and it's in your virtue pile at the end of the game, -5 points. 24, turning back. If this card is drawn from the upper cannon deck, then the turn order gets reversed. Number 25, without falsehood. This is a blue card. It gives you the power to take cards off of the top of the discard pile to make matches. That doesn't mean that you get to rummage through the discard pile to find trigram cards that you want to make matches. You're only allowed to just draw off the top one at a time of the discard pile. You have to use any card that you draw. You have to use to make a match. So, like I said, you only just get the top card. You don't get to go rummaging. 26, the Great Accumulation card. We talked about this card a little bit earlier with what card was it? With number 19, approaching. The Great Accumulation card is a blue card. It gives you the attribute of you do not lose any hexagram cards out of your virtue pile. This is the other card that protects you against eradicating. If you have this card in your hand, you do not lose hexagram cards. It also protects you from all of the other cards that tell you that you have to give away a hexagram card. So if we go back through the deck, that would be, for example, childhood. If you have this card in your virtue pile and someone draws the childhood card, you do not have to give the youngest player a hexagram card. Beginning, which tells you to return all of your lower cannon cards back to the deck. If you have this card in your virtue pile and you draw this card, you do not have to return any of your cards back to the decks. Likewise, with some of the other cards that make you give other players cards from your virtue pile, this protects you from it. Protects you from the Great Harvest. What it does not protect you from, does not protect you from trading virtue piles. So if you draw Union or Seeking Harmony, which makes you trade piles with another player, having this card in your hand does not protect you from trading virtue piles. All right, we're getting to the end here. Nourishing. Give each player one hexagram card. So you pick which card you're going to give each player out of your virtue pile. You pick. Again, if you have Great Accumulation in your virtue pile, you're protected from having to do this. 28, Great Exceeding. If you draw this card, it instructs you to draw 3 more lower cannon cards from the lower cannon deck, put them in your virtue pile. 29, Darkness. This is one of the double trigram cards. It's water over water. This one is worth 6 points if you have it in your virtue pile at the end of the game. The last card in the upper cannon is number 30, Brightness. It's fire over fire. It's worth 7 points. If you have this in your virtue pile at the end of the game, it's worth 7 points toward your final score. Okay, that's all the cards of the upper cannon. And now we're going to play some hands. See how it goes. Okay, here we are. We're going to start our game. I have my 3 decks laid out. Got my upper cannon deck, my lower cannon deck, my trigram deck. For this case, for these purposes, I'm gonna play as though there are 4 people playing this game. So first thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna deal everybody 4 cards. Okay. And then just for the sake of simplicity, we all drew cards off of the upper cannon deck to see who goes first. And we're just going to say that we're going to start with this player, and we're going to go around the table in a counterclockwise manner. I've got everybody's cards laid out, but I'm going to lay them out so that people can see them clearly. Now, if you look here, we've got some good changing line cards over here. This player, both of these players got multiple trigram cards that are the same. And you can see it doesn't, these can be different trigrams if you turn them one way or the other. And you're allowed to turn them any way you need to, it doesn't matter. So it could be either thunder or it could be mountain. You see water is always water. Heaven is always heaven. Earth is always earth. Fire is always fire. Alright, so let's get started. First thing, this guy, I'm going to flip a card over. Establishing the new, number 50. It's fire over wood. This guy looking at his cards, can he make a match? I can combine this changing line card with this to make fire, or I could also combine it with this to make wood, but I don't have enough to make both. So this fellow here cannot go. He can't make a match. So in this case, what he's going to do, because he has two heaven cards, he's going to get rid of one. He's going to discard one of them and draw a new card. That's the end of his turn. Now this guy gets to go. He's going to draw another card off of the lower cannon deck and put it here. Now this is the card that he needs to make a match to. Can he make a match? No, he can't. He has some changing line cards. So this card could make an opposite match for that trigram. However, he doesn't have the ability to turn this fire into an opposite match for the heaven, which would require him to turn these two yang lines into yin lines. So that can't work. How about if we do this? What if we combine this trigram with a changing line card to turn that line into a yang line? That would make these two cards together would match that trigram. Can I make this trigram into heaven with this other changing line card? No, because this changes yang to yin. I can't do it. So this player can't make a match or an opposite match either. His turn is over. He looks at his hand though and says, I don't want to change any of my cards. So he's going to leave his hand the way it is. Now we go to this player. He flips a card over. Can he make a match? Let's take a look. He's got developing gradually, which is wood over mountain. He has a ton of wood. He has 3 wood trigrams, so he can make a match there. However, the wood trigram doesn't match the mountain. However, he has this yin changing line card. He can turn one of these yin lines, one of these yang lines to a yin line. So this trigram can become mountain. So if he plays these 3 cards, he can make a match here. The other thing though he could do would be, he could make an opposite match. This card, when turned over, is an opposite match for that lower trigram. This card, if you turn it over and you make one of these yang lines into a yin line, it becomes the opposite of that. So this player now has a choice. He can say he's either making a regular match or he's making an opposite match. Their choice of what they're going to do. Either way, he takes those cards, he discards them, he gets to take these 3 cards and put them in his virtue pile. Because he won the stack, he gets to draw a card from the upper cannon deck. In this case, I did not shuffle. Let's shuffle it. He draw advance, go again. So puts that in his virtue pile as well, and he's going to go again. Now in this case, he's going to say he made an opposite match, so he's going to draw a second card. This time he drew hindrance. He may only make inverse matches. So he puts this card in his virtue pile as well. But now going forward, as long as that card's in his virtue pile, he can only make opposite matches. Now because he's going to go again, he's going to draw 3 new trigram cards for his hand. And then he's going to draw another card from the lower pile, from the lower cannon, to try to make a match. Now in this case, he has to make opposite matches. Let's see if he can do that. He's got this card here that can make an opposite match to that trigram. He has some changing line cards with this trigram. However, he cannot convert this trigram into water to make an opposite match. So he cannot go. Now comes this man's turn, this person's turn. He's gonna, because that couldn't make a match, he's gonna flip a new card over. He's gonna look at his cards and he's gonna see if he can make a match. In this case, he can. He can make an opposite match. If you notice, put these 2 trigrams together, they are an opposite. So he's gonna discard his cards. He's going to take these 2 cards, put them in his virtue pile. He's going to draw an upper cannon card because he won the stack. This one says grade exceeding, draw 3 lower cannon cards. So he gets to draw 3 more lower cannon cards. Ooh, got some good ones. Got some points over here. And because he made an opposite match, he's going to draw another card from the upper cannon. Ooh, he got darkness, worth 6 points. Just in that turn alone, this player just got 13, 19, 22 points. Okay, back to player 1. They have 4 cards in their hand already, don't need to draw any more cards from the trigram deck. I'm going to flip over a card from the lower cannon, see if I can make a match. Here we go. I've got heaven. I can match that. I've got fire. I've got this card that allows me to change a yang line to a yin line, so I'm going to combine it with the fire to make the mountain trigram. So these 3 cards in combination make a match for that hexagram. Discard my cards, get to put this card in my virtue pile. Play goes on to the next player. They already have 4 cards in their hand, so they turn a card over. Let's take a look. Can they make a match? We've got heaven over wood. We have an opposite match here, and look at this. Well, no. What can we do? I can turn this, again, I can turn this into heaven, or earth, by changing this yang line to a yin line, and that would make an opposite match of that trigram. But can I turn the fire trigram into an opposite of that? No, I can't. I have, looking at the cards here, I don't have a way of combining these cards to me either make a match or an opposite match. So again, this player can't go. This time he's frustrated. He wants some new cards. So he's going to get rid of his fire trigram card, draw a new card, put it there in his hand through the water. Now it proceeds to this player. This player is going to flip a new card over and see if they can go. They already have 4 cards in their hand. Now remember, this player has the hindrance card drawn, so they can only make opposite matches. So in this case, this player needs to make an opposite match of this card, which is lake over earth. In this case, he has this trigram, which is the opposite there. See that? And then this card is almost the opposite of here. And if he combines it with one of his yang changing line cards to turn this yin line into a yang line, then it becomes heaven, and it is an opposite of the earth. So these three cards in combination make an opposite match of this hexagram. So he wins that stack and goes into his virtue pile. He gets to draw a card from the upper cannon deck, which is seeking harmony. And that is that he has to trade virtue piles with another player. So he looks around and says, this player over here has the best virtue pile in terms of points right now. So what they're going to do is they're going to take all their cards, their virtue piles, and they're going to trade them. And so that means that the hindrance card that made this player have to make only opposite matches comes and transfers over to this player. And so this player now, for as long as that card is in their virtue pile, they can only make opposite matches too. The green cards have already been played, so their action is not followed through again. This player is it's still his turn. He has one more card to draw from the upper cannon. So he just drew Great Harvest. Pick one hexagram card to harvest from each player. So they look around and he says, all right, I'm going to take one of your cards. I'm going to take your card. And this player doesn't have any cards in their virtue pile, so they don't lose any cards at all. That's the end of this player's turn. Now it goes to this player. This player has two cards in their hand, so they have to draw two more cards from the trigram. They turn over a card to make a match. Now, remember, this player now has the hindrance card. They have to only make opposite matches. So let's take a look. Here's an opposite match for the top trigram, and here is the opposite match for the lower trigram. So he's going to take these two cards, discard them, and he makes that opposite match, and because they made an opposite match, going to draw a card from the upper cannon deck. In this case, he got brightness, worth 7 points. That goes into his virtue pile. Turn over. Now it's this player's turn. He's going to draw 3 cards from the trigram deck to make 4 cards in their hand. Turn a card over from the lower cannon deck to make a match. What can we do here? I can make one match with one of these trigrams, but I can't use my other cards to make a match with the fire trigram. Can't go. I have 2 earth cards, so I'm going to get rid of one of them. I'm going to trade one of them in and get a fresh card from the trigram pile, and thus concludes the turn here. Now we proceed to this player. They already have 4 cards in their hand, so they're just going to flip one over from the lower cannon deck. See if we can make a match. So, maybe. We've got water here, which can be the opposite of fire, and we've got this card, which, if I convert this middle yin line to a yang line, becomes the opposite trigram of this. So these 3 cards in combination make an opposite match for that card. So they can put those cards in their virtue pile because they want to stack. They get the reward card of the upper cannon. Humbleness. Give away half your virtue pile, then draw 5 lower cannon cards. So in this case, half of their virtue pile is only 1 card because they only have 2 cards in their virtue pile. So they give one of them away. They give it to this guy, this poor fellow, because he doesn't have any cards yet in his virtue pile. Put it right there. And then they're going to draw 5 more cards from the lower cannon to add to the virtue pile. So they lose a card, they get 5 cards in return. End of turn. We go to this fellow. Only 1 card in their hand They need to draw 3 trigram cards from the trigram deck. Turn over a lower cannon card, make a match. Let's see if we can make a match. Okay, we have earth over fire. So we've got water. We don't have fire, but we've got water, so we can make an opposite match on that. To make an opposite match, we would need a heaven trigram to make an opposite match to that earth. Can we do that? Yes, we can. We have this change line from a yin line to a yang line. If we combine these cards together, we can change that yin line to a yang line to make heaven. So these 3 cards in combination make an opposite match to this card. So we're going to do that. Discard our cards, take the card, put it in the virtue pile, and then draw an upper cannon card because we made an opposite match. So delight. Receive the highest value hexagram card from each player. Okay, so we come to this person. They only have 1 card. It's only worth 1. That's their highest value card. He gives it away. Come over here. This person has several cards. Their highest one is 7. They have to give that away. Over here, they have several cards in their hand, but they're all worth 1. So we're just going to give one of them away. That's the end of the turn. That's that card. Moving on. This player needs 2 more cards in their hand to make 4. Flip over a card. Let's see if we can make a match. This player, again, as you recall, has to make opposite matches. So this card is a hexagram of fire over wind or wood. So he needs or water over wood. So here we go. We've got fire, which is the opposite. Then we have this card, which is the same, but we have a yang to yin changing line card. So if we combine them, we can make this trigram into an opposite of that trigram, and we can make an opposite match. So we take that card and we draw an upper cannon card. Ooh, we got initiating, worth 9 points. This player seems to be getting all the high point cards, and then they lose them. All right, play one last round, and then I think you'll get the idea of how this goes. So already have 4 cards in my hand. Flip one over, make a match. I can make a match. Very simple. Here we go. These 2 trigram cards in combination match that. Boom. Into my virtue pile. We're done. This player needs to draw 3 more cards from the virtue pile. Ooh, we got a wild card. How great. Draw lower cannon deck. Here we go. What can we do? Well, we have this card, which makes a match, and we have a wild card. So if we combine those together, makes a match. Put that in our virtue pile. Going to this player needs 3 more cards in their hand to make 4. Turn the lower cannon card over. Here we go. What do we got? We got lake over water. So here's a water card. This is the opposite. Sorry about that. Ran out of battery. So back where we were. So here we go. We were talking about this play right here. So we got water to make a match. This card doesn't match that. It's an opposite match. However, we have this changing line card. We can change this yin line to a yang line to make a match with that. So these 3 cards together could make a match, or we could use the water with the wild card to make a match, or this card is the opposite match. We could combine it with this wild card to make an opposite match of this, and make an opposite match. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to make an opposite match. That's going to allow us to draw an upper cannon card. We got responding worth 8 points. Add that to our virtue pile. Now we go to this player. Needs to draw 3 cards to their hand to make 4. And flip the lower cannon card over. Remember, this player has hindrance, has to make an opposite match. So can we do that? We've got fire, makes opposite match to the water there. And then we have an earth card or a water card. Now in this case, I also have this changing line card of yin to yang. If I change this top yin line to yang, this earth becomes the opposite of this lake, which is mountain, if you can imagine that. And that makes an opposite match. So we're going to do that. We're going to make that opposite match. This card goes into our virtue pile, and we get to draw a card from the upper cannon. In this case, it's a green card. It's number 3, beginning. It says, return all your lower cannon cards back to the deck. So, you get to keep the upper cannon cards, which are these over here, but all of these cards have to be returned back to the lower cannon deck, which you might have noticed just prolonged the game a little bit. That's okay. That's what happens. So they just get added back to the bottom of the deck. No need to reshuffle. That's the way it goes. Now if he had drawn eradicating and everybody had to return all their cards, then all of the lower cannon cards would get sorted and put under the lower cannon deck, and all the upper cannon cards would have just been put together and placed under the upper cannon deck as well. No reshuffling. No reshuffling of the deck. Just keep them the way they are. And again, makes the game go on longer, but it's not too bad. The game will still come to an end fairly quickly. Anyway, so I think that's as many rounds as I'm going to play. A couple things. We almost got through the trigram deck. If we had, like I said before, all you do is just take the discard pile, turn it over, shuffle it a few times, start fresh, and you just keep playing until you've worked your way all the way to the last upper cannon card, or lower cannon card here, and we'll just pretend that that's where we're at, and we'll finish the game. So here we go. I got my 4 cards, turn it over, restricting. Can I make a match? No, I can't make a match. Total bummer. Okay, play goes to this next person. They need to draw 2 cards. Now, here we go. They have 3 changing line cards. You can't have that. So they're going to discard one of their cards and draw a fresh card so they have enough that they can play. Now let's see if we can make a match. In this case, we can. We can, if you see here, this card, can we? I have an opposite, but I can't. Yes, I can do it. Here we go, look at this. So this card is the opposite of the bottom trigram. This card I'm going to combine with a yin to yang line, so I'm going to turn this line into a yang line, and then I'm going to add this yang to yin line to change the center line to a yin line to make a fire trigram, if you can imagine that, which is the opposite of water. So I can play all 4 of my trigram cards here to make that match, and it's an opposite match. So get that card, and I get to draw a card from the upper cannon deck, and it is receive 1 hexagram card from the oldest player. So I'm going to pretend like this person's the oldest player, and he's just going to give away one of his hexagram cards out of his virtue pile to this player as a reward. Now, if that had not been the last card, because this player used all 4 of their cards from their hand to make a match, then that would give them that would win them the ability to go again. But because it was the last card of the lower cannon deck, that just ends the game. So here we are at the end of the game. We can just take all of our trigram cards and just discard them and get them out of the way. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add up our virtue piles. This player only has 1 card in their virtue pile, and it's only worth 1 point. So they have 1 point. This player over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 points. This player here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, plus 8 is 19, plus 7 is 26, plus 6 is 32, plus 7 is 39, plus 6 is 45. This player has 45 points. So we've got 1 to 10 to 45. Let's see what the last player has. The last player has 1, 2, 3, 4, plus 9 is 13. So they have 13 points. So it's 45 to 13 to 10 to 1. That's the end of the game. All right. So that's it. I hope you enjoy playing my little game. Yay! So that is an overview of Ching Cards of Destiny, how you play it. There's one last rule I want to just share with you, and that's the birthday card rule. Now, in I Ching astrology, every day of the week of the year is associated to a different hexagram of the I Ching. And so that means that for your birthday, there is a hexagram that can be associated with that day. There are a lot of different ways to calculate what your hexagram would be for your birthday. I'll just tell you. And you could look them up. Maybe one day when I'm really super organized, I'll create some kind of birthday calculator to put online or something. Don't think that'll ever happen. But anyway, I can tell you that I have done a calculation for myself a long time ago. My birthday card is number 40, Relief. So that's my birthday card. A really, really, really easy way to do it is just to pick your age. Whatever age you are, let's say you're 33. Well, then your birthday card is number 33. If you end the game with your birthday card in your virtue pile, it's worth 10 points. That's the birthday card rule. So a really easy thing to do as well, rather than just trying to calculate what your birthday is or something like that, is again, you could just use your age, or before the game starts, everyone declares what their birthday card number is going to be. And that way it's out, it's open, it's declared, and then everyone knows what numbers we're looking for. You can even write it down on a piece of paper to keep people from cheating or something. But that's the birthday card rule. If you end up with your birthday card in your virtue pile at the end of the game, it's worth 10 points. Yeah. I had a lot of fun making this game with my with my friend Diane and with my wife. A lot of, boy, we've done a lot of prototyping and a lot of playing with different rules and trying different things out. It's been fun. I hope that what we've come up with is a really fun game for you to play as well. In the process of that, there's a lot of what I would call prototype decks that exist that I've given away over the last year or so to people as I was developing the game. You might have one of those decks, so it might not match exactly what I had here today, but all of the decks that I've given away to friends are close enough that you should be able to play this game exactly as I showed you today on this video with the decks that you have in your possession at this time. If you want a fresh deck, you can always just call me. All right. Anyway, have fun. That was Ching Cards of Destiny.